Greetings and welcome to my proposal defense. Thank you, Dr. Hyde, my chair, and committee members Dr. Pascarella and Dr. Ho for your attendance and participation in my dissertation development. Today I am defending a proposed quantitative study of the impact of racial socialization trauma on teachers' compassion fatigue. Specifically, I am interested in understanding if compassion fatigue of teachers, one of the most potent symbols in the life of a young person, compromises the experiences of minority students in the classroom. To illustrate the importance of this problem, I have borrowed the words of author and activist James Baldwin, who explores race and class distinctions in the United States. This quote highlights the power dynamic of this study's setting, the classroom, and how the power of a teacher, unsupported and unaided, will perpetuate the challenges of justice described herein. With this in mind, please allow me to introduce myself and share this study. I am so many things. Today I am a researcher, but I am also a former teacher, a current operations manager responsible for education oversight, and all the time I am a mother, a daughter, an academic, and a student of life. Curiosity is my favorite word. I hold curiosity in my interactions at work, at home, and in the community. It is that spirit of curiosity that helped me develop this proposal. To appreciate the impact of race trauma on teachers' compassion fatigue and understand how these challenges show up in the classroom, I have developed 3 questions for this quantitative study. To understand how colorblind ideology prevents teachers from acknowledging racial socialization trauma, I will quantify what proportion of teachers implementing colorblind ideology recognize racial socialization trauma in their students. To understand how such activities result in compassion fatigue, I will quantify what percentage of teachers express emotional exhaustion when teaching diverse student populations. Finally, to understand how teachers receive support in mitigating such experiences in the classroom, I will quantify to what extent teachers describe student stress as a factor in their own stress and fatigue. This study is important because while teacher burnout has been researched with some focus and attention on slowing or preventing teacher turnover and improving student performance, very little work has been done on teachers' compassion fatigue. In fact, the compassion fatigue literature and research referenced in this proposal were often conducted abroad, indicating this concern has not been addressed with frequency in the United States. Teacher burnout is known to generate after years of exhaustion. This differs from compassion fatigue, which can result from a single occurrence of exposure to a misunderstood emotional challenge, as opposed to many occurrences building up over time. Because teachers view and assess minority students through a colorblind lens, they lack the training to understand the impact of race trauma on minority students' social emotional well-being, resulting in teachers mistaking emotional trauma for poor behavior. Therefore, the classroom environment contains the juxtaposed forces of race trauma and colorblindness. Because teachers lack learning, training, and support around compassion fatigue, they are not fortified with the skills to understand their minority students. Moreover, it does not help them name and address their compassion fatigue, creating a dynamic of social injustice that can endure in the classroom. The literature demonstrates that this is a long-term issue. In the social context, the American Civil Rights Movement started a social and legislative dialogue about school segregation's inherent inequalities. Desegregation was the intended solution to unequal and unjust educational experiences in the classroom. However, the analysis of housing and lending patterns designed to limit minority communities' ability to build wealth through home and business ownership in urban communities led to a lack of property taxes in these areas, the primary funding source for the public education system. These practices, known as redlining, led to underfunded public schools and white flight from urban communities, essentially re-segregating schools and recreating the same pre-desegregation classroom dynamics. Colorblind ideology was the proposed solution to this phenomenon, dictating that not seeing color created classroom equality. However, educational disparities and the minority community's inability to build wealth denied minority students and their parents access to the social structures such as continuing education and opportunities for economic growth that build upward mobility, relegating minority families to inner city areas where cycles of poverty endured. The literature effectively demonstrates the existence of racial socialization trauma. Racism and discrimination experienced in the minority community generate feelings of isolation, low self-esteem, anger, and anxiety. emotional responses often associated with trauma. White-dominated rhetoric denies the existence of systemic racism, creating doubt and shame. Moreover, white-dominated social environments, such as school settings, mire social emotional challenges into this environment. Continued exposure to racism and discrimination in housing practices, media, and other social contexts, such as school, perpetuate these experiences and have led to PTSD-like symptoms such as maladaptive behaviors and interpersonal challenges. Because the social context adds little space for openly discussing and dismantling racism in and out of the classroom, discrimination and its associated trauma are relegated to the minority community to mitigate internally. Research demonstrates that in this case, students in the classroom do not benefit from the collaborative partnership between school and family, limiting the school's role in supporting the emotional growth of minority students. As the evidence and the history of racial socialization trauma are robust, the research questions and methodology are not designed to determine if this exists, but rather how it interacts with colorblind ideology and how its continuance contributes to compassion fatigue. As stated earlier, colorblind ideology was the supposed solution to race-based achievement gaps and touted as the pedagogy of fairness. In practice, however, this socially learned method protects white dominance and contributes to racial socialization trauma. Colorblind ideology and its associated policies position minority students into subordinate roles in the classroom. This is most clearly evidenced when this pedagogy is compared to multicultural and anti-racist curricula. These curricula dismantle bias as a barrier in the learning environment, softening the disparities between dominant and minority students in the classroom. However, research demonstrates multicultural and anti-racist pedagogy have yet to permeate teachers' learning experiences, allowing colorblindness to remain in place, reinforcing minority students' continued race trauma and perpetuating the belief that to be colorblind is to be fair. The literature confirms that at least 50% of minority students experience racism and discrimination significant enough to result in emotional trauma. In fact, these traumatic expressions such as anger, low self-esteem, and emotional withdrawal resemble the responses of rape, abuse, and assault victims. Industries that typically serve these victims, such as social workers, mental health specialists, and first responders, recognize the impact of exposure to trauma victims. These industries weave training and reflection into their learning experiences to prepare these workers to encounter and recover from emotional exhaustion associated with this exposure. However, teacher learning does not, even though research demonstrates teachers and child care workers describe emotional exhaustion and compassion fatigue commensurate with these traditional helping industries. The outcome of denying teachers training and support in responding to and addressing their compassion fatigues creates the impression that the classroom is emotionally unsafe for students and teachers. In fact, 41% of teachers expressed high levels of emotional exhaustion, and of these teachers, 70% reported exposure to students' trauma. Teachers also expressed experiencing PTSD-like symptoms requiring therapeutic intervention. If teachers are experiencing emotional exhaustion and compassion fatigue concerning their classroom experiences, their relational counterparts, the students, are also affected. Research highlights the experience is compounded when even one minority student expressing race trauma is enrolled in a classroom. As this presentation has suggested, much of these experiences are reinforced in the social context. Therefore, the social cognitive theory serves as this study's theoretical framework. This theory asserts that learning integrates knowledge, values, and beliefs and attitudes into behavior when supported by a community. As racial socialization trauma and colorblind ideology are learned in the social space, the interactions of these experiences in the learning environment generates teachers' compassion fatigue. The interplay of these phenomena results in reduced teacher and student motivation. The purpose of this study is to determine the extent to which colorblind ideology fails to address racial socialization trauma, ultimately contributing to teacher fatigue and minority students' performance. Within the social cognitive theoretical framework, this study is designed to understand how socially learned values, beliefs, and attitudes perpetuate colorblind school environments that dismiss racial discrimination as a social emotional factor, resulting in compassion fatigue. A quantitative study seeks the responses of 900 current teachers in the Charlotte-Mecklenburg School District. The survey contains 18 prompts that align with the 3 research questions. Ordinal responses are followed by a qualitative box for respondents to add personal experiences, if any. The Charlotte-Mecklenburg School District was selected because it is the researchers' hometown, and there is access to the district's teachers' union. The district employs approximately 9,000 teachers in the K-12 learning environment. The survey includes demographic information and will control for mainstream, ESL, and special education classrooms. A 4-part Likert scale, removing a neutral option, was designed to compel teachers to commit to a response to the 18 different prompts that are in the survey. The survey was adopted from the Personal and Professional Beliefs About Diversity Scale, a reliable and valid tool with proven outcomes of success to solidify this project's reliability and validity. The survey was developed in the Qualtrics survey virtual platform, and responses will be entered there and analyzed there as well. An outside third party will be used to support the analysis process to add a third-party perspective and eliminate confirmation bias. Validity and reliability are supported by Pilot, which demonstrated outcomes of validity and reliability. It was adopted, of course, from a pre-existing tool, and it considered psychometric factors such as diversity, personal and professional experiences, and social and expert attitudes that influence values and behaviors. Ethical considerations were taken in developing the methodology and the design of this study. It will, of course, receive IRB approval. All participants will be able to complete informed consent, and all respondents will be over the age of 18 years old. All respondents will also receive My Dissertation Chair's contact information and may contact them at any time to discuss me, the researcher, or the validity of the project. Limitations and delimitations were also taken into consideration. First and foremost, it is region-specific. It is actually in one portion of a state. The entire state or the entire country would have to be looked at in order for this study to be more generalizable. Also, classroom observations and in-person interviews were not considered for this study because of the COVID-19 crisis and the safety of respondents and the researcher. However, in-person interviews and classroom observations would benefit a study like this. It's also a self-reported study, which is known to be unreliable. It was supported by, or delimitation was adding the qualitative box to the survey to allow respondents to do more than just select a Likert scale, but to actually provide personal experience. The intention is that this study will provide a robust understanding of how colorblind ideology interacts with racial socialization trauma, resulting in teachers' compassion fatigue, limiting student and teacher experiences.